The mornings in their home no longer began with silence. The first thing that broke the dawn was a soft giggle, a sound that slipped through the air like sunlight through the curtains. Sun Yujin, still half asleep, would smile before even opening her eyes. It wasn't an alarm clock that woke her anymore. It was the gentle laughter of Alkong, their little world. Their small miracle. Hyun, usually the first to rise now, would already be in the living room, hair tousled, holding their son high in the air as Alkong squealed in delight. The once perfectly tidy home was now a playground of scattered toys, small socks, and forgotten pacifiers. It was chaos. A kind of chaos that made them feel alive. Every day, Alkong grew a little taller, a little louder, a little more mischievous. He had inherited his mother's soft eyes and his father's determined expression. When he wanted something, could resist him, especially Hyun, who had played heroes and generals on screen but turned into the most patient man in the world when faced with his son's tiny pout. Kneel on the floor, building wooden towers that Alkong would immediately destroy with triumphant laughter. The sound filled the house like music, echoing off the walls that once held only framed posters and awards. Now, they held something far more precious, the warmth of a family discovering itself every single day. Sun Yujin often caught herself staring. Sometimes it was at her husband, holding their son like the most fragile treasure in his arms. Sometimes it was at the small footprints that trailed across the hallway after bath time. She used to measure her days by schedules, scripts, by scenes. Now, time was marked by the rhythm of Alkong's growth, his first smile, his first step. The first time he called her Yama in a voice barely more than a whisper. That whisper had undone her completely. In that moment, she felt something that no stage, no award, no applause could ever give. Life had slowed down for them. In the most beautiful way. The couple who once lived under the flashing lights of cameras had learned to cherish the quiet, the smell of milk and soap, the softness of bedtime songs, the simple miracle of watching their son drift to sleep. Hyun, once meticulous about every detail, now wore baby food stains on his shirts like medals. Sun Yujin, who used to fear imperfection, now laughed at the mess. When Alkong decided to scribble all over the white living room wall with a crayon, she didn't scold him. Took another color and added a small sun next to his drawing. That wall became a story, their family's new beginning. There were nights when exhaustion crept in. When Alkong's cries echoed past midnight, Sun Yujin would sit in the dim glow of a nightlight, humming softly, eyes heavy but heart full. Hyun would appear moments later, his voice gentle, his hands steady as he took the baby in his arms. "Go rest. I've got him," he would whisper. She would watch the two of them. The way Alkong's tiny fingers curled around his father's, and something in her would ache with tenderness. Fame, success, the weight of expectation, all of it faded. In that small circle of light, only love remained. Their days were now painted in laughter and tiny disasters. Hyun would trip over toy cars on his way to the kitchen. Sun Yujin would chase Alkong around the house as he giggled uncontrollably, hiding behind curtains that barely covered his tiny feet. Sometimes, they would collapse together on the couch, breathless and laughing, the sound of their joy filling the entire house. There's no script to this life. No director shouting cut, only raw, imperfect moments that stitched their hearts closer together. In the evenings, when the sun dipped low and the house grew quiet again, Hyun would cradle Alkong against his chest and hum softly. Sun Yujin would sit nearby, a book unopened in her lap, watching the two of them in silence. The golden light framed them, father and son, and for a moment, everything else fell away. Realized that this was what happiness looked like. Not the red carpets or the flashing lights, but the stillness of a home filled with laughter and love. Every night before sleep, they would whisper small promises to each other, that they'd protect this peace. That no matter how busy the world became, they'd always come back to this little home. To the heartbeat of their son. The fame outside their door meant nothing compared to the world within it. And every morning, when Alkong woke with a mischievous grin, ready to begin another day of tiny adventures, Hyun and Sun Yujin would exchange a tired smile, the kind that only parents understand. Because even in the sleepless nights and endless noise, they had found something irreplaceable. They had found the reason their hearts beat in unison again. Alkong, in all his innocent mischief, had done what neither fame nor time could do. He reminded them what love truly meant. wasn't grand gestures or perfect moments, it was patience, laughter, and the quiet courage to begin every day again, together. As the sun rose, painting their home in soft gold, Sun Yijin whispered, half to herself, half to the little boy tugging at her sleeve. "You're growing too fast, Alkong." Hyun smiled, pulling them both close. "Let him," he said softly. "Every day he grows. Our hearts grow too." Outside, the world kept spinning. But inside that small home stood still, wrapped in the laughter of a child and the love of two souls who had found everything they'd ever been searching for. The seasons passed quietly. Inside their home, time moved with a rhythm of tiny footsteps and endless laughter. Alkong was no longer the fragile baby they once held with trembling hands. He was walking now, wobbling at first, running with fearless joy. The moment his feet touched the floor each morning, the world began again. Ben barely had time to sip his coffee before Alkong's small hands were tugging at his sleeve, pulling him toward another adventure, whether it was stacking blocks, sunlight on the balcony, or simply hiding behind the sofa to surprise his mother with a giggle that melted the whole room. Sun Yijin often said that Alkong carried both of them within him, Hyunbin's quiet determination and her boundless warmth. He had her habit of laughing too easily. Father's serious stare when he concentrated. Watching him was like seeing their love take shape. Walking and breathing and smiling back at them. Each day with him felt like a new chapter written in invisible ink, soft, fleeting, but eternal in memory. The walls of their home bore witness to these stories, faint pencil marks that measured his height, fingerprints on glass doors, little footprints leading from the kitchen to the garden. Every mark was proof that life had truly begun. Their daily routines became rituals of love. Breakfasts were no longer calm, elegant affairs, they were symphonies of clattering spoons and Alkong's curious fingers reaching for fruit slices. Hyun, once meticulous about order, laughed when cereal scattered across the table. He found joy in imperfection, something he had never allowed himself before. Sun Yijin, ever graceful, covered that love sometimes meant surrendering, to the mess, to the noise, to the unexpected beauty of ordinary days. Watch her husband and son laughing together, their heads tilted the same way, and feel her chest tighten with gratitude. At night, when the house finally quieted, they'd sit side by side, watching old photos of their early days together, the first movie set, their wedding, the first ultrasound. "Thought we knew what happiness was," Yijin would whisper, resting her head on his shoulder. Hyun would nod, eyes on the picture of Alkong asleep with his toy car. And then he came. He'd reply softly. Everything changed. There were difficult days too. Parenthood was not always soft or poetic. There were tantrums, sleepless nights, and days when exhaustion made them both short-tempered. Sometimes Sun Yijin would retreat into the bathroom, tears silently falling as she listened to Alkong's cries from the other side of the door. Sometimes Hyun, filming schedules and fatherhood, would feel the sting of guilt for not being home enough. But in the end, they always returned to each other, to quiet apologies whispered in the dark, to hands that found one another in the silence. That was love's truest form, not perfection, but persistence. As Alkong grew older, he began to understand the world around him, and the world began to understand him. Fans caught glimpses of the family on walks. Hyun with a baseball cap pulled low, Yijin laughing behind sunglasses, and Alkong between them, clutching both their hands. The images spread quietly online, followed by comments filled with awe and warmth. "They look so happy," someone wrote. And they were. Not because their lives were easy, but because they had learned to treasure the fleeting moments between chaos and calm. Their home was filled with sound, laughter, tiny footsteps, the soft hum of lullabies. But there were also moments of stillness that felt sacred. Sometimes, late at night, when Alkong was asleep and the city outside grew quiet, Hyun and Sun Yijin would stand by his crib, watching him breathe. His lashes trembled in dreams, his small hands curled like petals, and they would exchange a glance that said everything. "We made this. We're raising love itself." Hyun often found himself thinking about how much he'd changed. The man who once lived for precision, for control, now lived for moments he couldn't predict, the sudden laughter, the messy hugs, the soft weight of his son in his arms. "He teaches me," Yijin one night, "to let go, to feel, to live slower." She smiled, her fingers against his cheek. He teaches me too, she whispered. To believe that love can keep growing. On weekends, they often escaped to the countryside, just the three of them. There. Away from flashing cameras. They walked through fields, picked flowers, and watched Alkong chase butterflies with the clumsy grace of a toddler discovering the world. Hyun would carry him on his shoulders, to clouds, while Yejin snapped quiet photos, moments she would later keep in a small album labeled Our Everyday Miracles. In those photographs, nothing was glamorous. No perfect poses. No studio lighting, just truth. A mother's smile, a father's gaze. A child's joy. But somehow, that truth was more cinematic than any film they had ever made. It was the story of two people who had fallen in love once on screen, and now lived a deeper love of it, one built not on fame, but on patience, sacrifice, and the laughter of a boy named Alkong. One evening, as twilight spilled into their living room, Alkong toddled over with a drawing clutched in his hand. Appa. Iyama, he said proudly, pointing at the scribbles. It was three stick figures, holding hands, smiling under a crooked sun. Hyun took the paper gently, his throat tightening. It's us, Yejin whispered, eyes glistening. Alkong nodded, grinning. Family. Hung the drawing on the refrigerator, beside old Polaroids and shopping lists. It wasn't just a child's drawing, it was their entire story in one picture. Three hearts, held together by love stronger than any script, any stage, any storm. Later that night, as Alkong drifted into sleep and wrapped an arm around Yejin, the house was quiet again. The kind of silence that felt alive. Miss the old days, he asked softly. She shook her head. No, she whispered. This is the story I always wanted to live. And somewhere in the next room, their son stirred in his dreams. A faint smile on his lips, as if he knew he was the heartbeat that kept them whole. Outside, the city moved on, bright, loud, and busy. But within that small home, love lingered like music long after the song had ended. The laughter of a child had rewritten their lives. And they wouldn't trade it for anything in the world. 'Cause sometimes, all it takes to change two lives forever is one small soul who calls you Appa and Iyama. And in that name, everything begins again.